Welcome to the Inside Carolina podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. It is Sunday. That means it is the day after. And with the day after podcast means Carolina must have had a game on Saturday. Tar Heels went down to Georgia looking for what they could steal, and they came up with a big L in Atlanta. Buck, it feels like we've done this podcast at least 6 times in the Mac Brown 2.0 era, and it feels like the same show over and over. So we're not going to go on and on and on about it, but I will say this to lead the show and then let you guys set me straight. It can't keep happening the same way. At some point, the coaching staff has got to do something different. That's my opinion. They looked awful yesterday. Jeff Sims looked like an All-American. The defense got shredded. The offense was bad, pretty much just like it's been on every primetime away game since Mac got back. Buck, your take.
Well, it's been that way on 1 out of 6 of them, or 5 out of 6. The last 6 night games, Tar Heels have lost 5 of them. And pretty much in the same fashion. Several of those games, last night and then against Florida State and against Virginia, the Tar Heels were 14-point favorites. So it seems like there's a magic formula for North Carolina to lose a game like this, and that's play away from home, be a 14-point favorite, and play at night. Throw in wearing the Stormtrooper unis, and you got a recipe for disaster. I can't explain it. And I guess that's probably okay, since I'm not the one that gets paid the big bucks to explain it. So, but I do think some explanations and some fixes are in order.
100% agree with that. Jason, got a lot to talk about on this one. But to Buck's point, we can't explain it. The people that are getting paid to explain it are saying it's embarrassing, got to be better, and all that. But, that's cool 1 or 2 times. But we're up to 5 times on the road. And Georgia Tech, credit them. I mean, Jeff Collins had them ready to play, and they came out and held on long enough before exploding, Jason. But the preparation, the keeping your team level, keeping your team, where you don't have these such drastic up and downs. I mean, that lies at the feet of the grown-ups in the room, like I tweeted last night. And I'm glad we don't do these shows right after the game. But, Jason, give us some reasoning here before we get into the nuts and bolts of how this one went down.
Well, I mean, I think you do need, as a staff, to evaluate what you're doing on the road in terms of preparation, in terms of how you're handling things at the hotel, in terms of everything needs to be considered, because it is absolutely clear that your players are not as comfortable and as prepared as they should be when they're playing on the road. I mean, the road versus home difference for this team the last few years has been really, really large. And you have to figure out what is it that is what changes in our routine are there? What are we able to do at home that we haven't been able to do it on the road? And what is it that needs to be fixed in that preparation process? Because there's clearly a disconnect. There is clearly something going on there in terms of the preparation process. I mean, you all know I'm not all that keen on people, crediting home field or home crowd difference. The crowd doesn't beat you, but there is definitely a difference between home and away in terms of performance of this Carolina team, and it has been the last few years. So at that point, what is it is the question. It's unlikely to be the crowd, but you start looking at the numbers and you go, yeah, there's a really significant fall off, and particularly on offense, interestingly. I mean, I think the offense has really struggled with comparatively at home versus on the on the road versus at home. So you need to figure out what it is that you can get more comfortable at and where you can make some of those adjustments. And again, I think a large percentage of that has to be in terms of what you're doing preparation wise. But I don't think there's any easy answers.
Definitely not. There is an easy result that we see, and that the Carolina fan base is justifiably a little bit irate about. But looking at this ball game, Buck, let's start on the offensive side. I mean, Sam Howell makes a run early. One of the more impressive quarterback runs I've seen Carolina quarterback make. Been watching and doing this stuff for a long time. And then they just fall off a cliff. It sort of reminds me of games in the past where, and it's not just Carolina, it's other schools. So teams go down, score, make it look fairly easy, and then the wheels and the rails and all that fall off. What did you see from the offensive side of the ball? I know this. I know Georgia Tech had 2 or 3 sacks coming into the game, and they had 8 or 9 or something like that last night. I'm looking at the numbers, but admittedly very bleary-eyed. Does this rest with the offensive line, or is it time to start heaping a little bit of the blame on Sam Howell, a little bit more of the blame on Sam Howell, maybe?
Well, from the beginning, I've always thought that Sam held on to the ball a little too long, and the coaching staff has also said the same thing, that Sam needs to let the ball go a little sooner, go to the check down a little quicker. And last night, though, even very early on, even in that first drive, it seemed like Sam was just off. He overthrew several passes early. I think he was only 1 of 5 of his first passes, first pass attempts. He went 1 of 5, and several of those he overthrew Antoine Green a couple of times. They went to Antoine Green early a lot, and it just did not seem. And I think that was probably by plan that they went to Green so many times early, but Sam was overthrowing him, and he just did not look comfortable from the get-go. Later on in the game, Sam was missing some throws. It was pointed out on the television replay, but there were several post routes, deep post routes, that Sam just didn't see. He just missed them entirely, and the guy was open. So it's hard to figure exactly what was going on, and I think some of it was going on in Sam Howell's head. He just was not. I think I got an agreement, an amen there from
Mr. Staples
Mr.
and
Staples.
his
Yeah.
YouTube crowd. You need to see the head bob. Go ahead, Buck.
But any event, there's a lot of blame to go around. As far as Georgia Tech being able to scheme North Carolina's offensive line, there's several occasions where, particularly when North Carolina went to its power game, where they were pulling guys, they were pulling the Izidu and guys, Seam Richards one time, and rallies. They bring the tight end over as sort of a pull. They were getting there late. Georgia Tech was beating them to the spot where the puller was supposed to be, and getting a clean run through on the offensive line. That guy that was pulling across the line of scrimmage was supposed to get that guy coming through, but didn't get there on time. Georgia Tech got through there quicker than the puller was able to block it up. So part of it was by scheme. A lot of it was by effort, just sheer effort. Georgia Tech was just more energized, it seemed like, the entire game. That was pretty easy to see. Just a myriad of things. I don't think you can point to one thing exclusively, but I think, as I said earlier, a lot of what was going on in Sam's head contributed probably number one.
Jason, I'll let you come in here. I mean, when you look at the numbers at the end of the day, 25, 39, 306, and 2, and no interceptions. Hey, that looks like a solid night. You toss in 3 fumbles and 8 sacks, and you turn into a big defeat. What's going on in Howell's head? I do find it interesting that folks have, well, some folks have jumped off the Howell bandwagon. Somebody tweeted at me that he's mediocre quarterback, always has been, blah, blah, stuff like that. Clearly, though, this year's been different. I think the pressure of replacing guys has fallen square on his shoulders, at least in his head. And it's shown a lot by, like Buck said, just trying to do too much and not being in the moment, but trying to be bigger than the moment. Where do you see, Jason?
Well, there's a few things here that kind of have to be evaluated at once. And Buck mentioned the few angles that we were able to see of where you actually were able to see receivers. Because those were some of the tightest and worst angles of any game you'll ever see shot. Inexcusable from the ESPN folks to shoot a game where when a quarterback throws, the only people you see on screen are the quarterback and offensive lineman.
And to that point, how easy is it to zoom out?
It's just not hard. But the problem is that these camera operators imagine that they're doing art house theater, that you need to zoom in on the player and all of this. No. We don't want to zoom in on the player. We're not interested in seeing the player. We want to watch the game where there's, 22 players on the field. It would be nice to be able to see the game. And that would help be able to assess what's going on. But there were a number of plays where they were a little wider at times. I think the camera operator was just asleep or forgot to zoom in too far. And on those plays, there were some significant things that I was seeing. And the biggest concern that I've had about Howell in the past, in terms of his processing quickly and getting the ball out, has continued to show up this year. And one of the things that's paired with is the reason that he's getting the ball out, or that he's not getting the ball out, is the most concerning thing to me. This is not a situation where you've just got guys that are covered and there's nobody open, and so he's not getting it out. The problem is that he's locking in on one receiver, and then he's waiting for that guy to get open or clear a specific player, and he's not actually seeing the field or reading the full secondary in order to say, okay, oh wow, safety jumped, that's going to be open, and come off of his first guy. So Buck, you mentioned those couple post routes that came open deep that he missed, and of course he made up for it with what he does best, which is throw the deep ball on a couple plays later. But the reason that he missed those post routes is the most concerning thing for me. And that's that he was locked in on the first one in particular. He was locked in on Josh Downs coming open. It's like he was watching where his eyes should be as a quarterback coach, where his eyes should be is looking. You always get your eyes to the backside safety first. He's going to tell you what the defense is, what the defense actually is. There's the old, corners lie, safeties tell the truth. Backside safety is always going to tell you what the coverage is. So your eyes should go there immediately first. Just glance at him, see what he's doing, where he's at is going to tell you what's going on. As soon as you look at where that backside safety is, now you look at that front side safety, and they're running just the college route. It's the old Mills concept from Steve Spurrier, where you have basically an in route from one of the receivers on the same side and a post route over the top of that. Your read is pretty simple. If that safety steps forward, you throw it over his head. And you should be looking at that safety. That's where your eyes go. But his eyes were actually not on that safety from what I could tell. He was looking for the underneath coverage for Downs to clear, and he was waiting on Downs. But if his eyes are where they're supposed to be, this is an eye discipline issue. If his eyes are where they're supposed to be, he pulls the trigger as soon as that safety stays put. But his eyes are not in the right spot because he's looking for a player to clear to grass, and he's waiting on his guy. And that, you just can't have that in a third-year starter at quarterback. That kills you. And the thing is, they called the same play twice because it came open. And that's one of those, like, you signal that in and you go, go post, whatever your signal for post is, look post, peek post. And he still missed it. And in this case, it was because his footwork was bad and because he again got locked in on another receiver. So to me, a big part of why he's holding onto the ball so long is that he's deciding pre-snap much more often than not who his target is almost certainly going to be. And if it's not that guy, his process slows down and he's not getting his eyes in the right spot. And then he starts to move a little bit and then he gets in trouble. And that hurts your wide receivers. That absolutely kills your offensive line because the ball's got to be out. And if you look at his time to release on 8 of those sacks, so he had 8? You said 8 sacks. I'm looking at it now. Yeah,
Yep,
8 sacks. So you look at 8 sacks. I need to go back through them, but I would venture to bet that if I were coaching offense, I would have credited 6 of those 8 sacks to Sam. That they're on the quarterback. Your job was to get it out here. You didn't get rid of the ball against this particular look to the right guy on time. And the reason you're on your back is because you just didn't assess and look where you need to on the field to be able to get rid of the football to the right guy. And I think what we're seeing right now is, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of times, young guys get higher grades than older guys because, film you start to see weaknesses with different personnel and all that stuff. Howell's been exposed a little bit in the last few weeks without the security blanket of those 2 stud running backs. And in particular, Daz, basically Downs has compensated for Daz, but in particular, you have De'Ami Brown. So without Brown and without those 2 backs, he's actually having to spread the ball across the field to different receivers and actually make reads instead of being a pick and pop guy. And what I mean by a pick and pop guy is you pick your receiver and then you just let it loose. You just pop, bam, and it's out because you know where you're going pre-snap, or you know where you're going based on that guy with that matchup is going to win. The guy, what his strengths are. He's an accurate thrower when he's in the pocket, really accurate. He's got a phenomenal deep ball, one of the best in college football the last few years, no question. And when he knows where he's got to throw and he throws from the pocket, he's generally going to put it on target. Although even there, sometimes he's been inconsistent this year. I mean, some of his ball locations have not helped. I mean, he's actually thrown high more often this year than he did in the past. But as soon as he's not picking and popping, as soon as it's not okay, there's going to be grass here, there's going to be space here, and now I'm just throwing it to my guy. As soon as it's okay, this is a three receiver route based on this coverage, you're going to have 3 options and the coverage may shift post snap and you're not sure who's going to come open. As soon as you put him in that situation, the processing speed has not been there and he's not made those decisions as quickly as he needs to. And I think also not making those decisions as quickly has led to some of the accuracy differences that we've seen at times, because he's throwing in a hurry instead of processing on time and throwing based on when he should be throwing. So there's a lot going on there. But the fact is, to me, this offense was going to go as far as Sam Howell was going to take him this year. And there are definite things that could be better around him. I mean, I think the running backs had a poor day in terms of their vision. I thought the offensive line was average. I thought the receivers were a little above average. But basically, this was a situation where you're expecting a third-year Sam Howell to make everybody better, and he didn't. And, in certain cases, he actually made his teammates look worse by not doing what you would expect him to do as a third-year player. And I know that's heavy criticism, but I mean, it's that's multiple games this year where that's been the case from him. So, it's the tape doesn't lie.
Buck, I caught your head nodding there. I mean, a lot of people, and I think there's trust issues with the receivers. There is offensive line issues clearly, but I agree with Jason here. He's got to be better. I mean, when he puts one there for a touchdown, guys got to catch it. That alleviates a lot of the issues. But Buck, you were nodding your head when Jason was talking. I don't know what's more surprising on this season than what Jason just described. What do you think?
Well, again, I think Jason is kind of nailing it with the personnel issues, and I do think that the loss of Michael Carter and Javonte Williams are the two biggest losses off of the offense. If they had both of those guys back this year and the same receiving core, I think they'd be fine because they could count on those guys. We saw a couple of times last night where North Carolina had a 2nd and 1 and couldn't convert it. And then the 3rd and 1 and couldn't convert it.
Running back ran right into the back of the offensive line. There was a seam by design that he's got to hit, and he just completely missed it. With Javonte Williams, and this is the difference. With Javonte Williams, it's probably a 6-yard gain instead of a 1-yard loss.
Or a 30-yard gain.
Yeah, there might be that too.
One of those. So I do think that the running back issue, and I think Ty Chandler's given it all he's got, and he does look good at times, but Ty Chandler is cannot compensate for the loss of Carter and Williams. That just not happening. And last year on that 2nd and 1 play, it's 1st down, move on to the next play. And that gives a quarterback so much more confidence and just he's thinking positive more often. That when this play comes and it's an RPO, I got no problem handing the ball off to Javonte or Michael because I know they're going to get 8 or 9 yards for me, and then next time around, if I see something open, the defense can't stop it all, so I'm going to get mine as the game develops. Now, to Jason's point, I would disagree a bit on the offensive line as is average comment because they weren't making any holes for the running backs for the most part.
Oh, I saw quite a few, actually. I saw a lot of them, but they were missed. And this is the thing. The running back's job is to make the offensive line look good. And one of the ways that you can think about this is, you remember how even 2 years ago, we would talk about how, man, it just seems like the offensive line just blocks better for Javonte Williams. Well, there's a reason for that, because he would actually see where he was supposed to go. He would read on the fly, and his eyes and his feet were lined up. And all of a sudden he'd run to where there was daylight, whereas other backs wouldn't necessarily even see that daylight. And we're in a situation right now where there's not obvious, okay, they've opened this big gap right here and you're supposed to go right there. But, you got a zone scheme and things are getting washed. And if you just stick your foot in the ground and peel back, you've got a seam for positive yardage. There was a lot of that, and the backs just didn't hit it. Now, I agree they didn't open a bunch of big holes, but there was space to be had.
And there were a ton of tackles for loss too. How many? I'm thinking, I don't have the stat sheet in front of me, 14, 15, something crazy like that.
13.
13. So, I mean, there's only so much a running back can do if he is hit in the backfield. Now, you're right. Even there, a lot of that is vision and knowing
Yep.
where to put your foot in the ground and all that sort of thing. But
And of those 13, 8 are sacks.
so that's a pretty good night by a defensive line that had 2 sacks and 5 or 6 tackles for loss against 3 other teams.
Yeah,
So
I think most of those were from Thomas, who
Charlie
was more of a
Thomas.
flex player. Yeah.
Charlie
So
Thomas,
4 point-
4.5 tackles for loss, 2.5
Yep,
sacks.
2.5 sacks. Yep.
That's a hell of a night.
Yeah, he had an all ACC night, folks. That's did some work.
yeah, so there's clearly some issues with the offensive line. We can't just let them off the hook, so to speak.
Amen.
But certainly there was and the receivers, if you, again, of course, stat sheets can be deceiving at times, but you're talking about Howell's passing numbers for the night: 306, high completion percentage, a couple of touchdowns, looked really good from a pure passing point statistically. But at the same time, the numbers can be very deceiving in the sense that on the same stat sheet, you will see probably the best night the receiving group has had in terms of diversity of catches and numbers and so on and so forth. Like Morales had 7 catches for 66. Emory Simmons had a good night. Josh Downs had a number of catches and a number of yards. Give the stat sheet a quick look. Simmons had 110 yards, his best night of the season, I think, or close to it. Morales had 66, Downs had 53, and Antoine Green had 50. That's the best night that UNC has had in terms of the most participation from the most number of guys in the passing game. So, the receiving core, was getting open and getting a solid number of yards, and Howell was getting the ball there enough to win. But the running game wasn't there, and the turnovers just killed North Carolina, and the sacks. So that's the story of the day or the night for offense for me. But the defense, we probably can't get off of this podcast without talking about the defense some.
You're right there. I'm going to talk about Johnny T-shirt, johnnyt-shirt.com briefly, so we can take a break, and I'm going to get back on the angle I was going to take for this entire show. But Johnny T-shirt, certainly sponsors of this podcast, great friends of Inside Carolina and great friends of you. If you're a premium subscriber, you get 10% off your everyday order. They've got a great selection there. I get emails for sales all the time. So sign up for their emails. Sign up for Inside Carolina Premium. It's quite interesting on the premium boards right now. Yeah. And you get the analyst or the analysis from Buck Sanders. Great column on Buck Stops Here. Another great one today. Jason Staples films breakdowns. That will be interesting this week. And also, again, that 10% with Johnny T-shirt. Take a short break. Let the national guys pay the bills. We'll be right back. Day after podcast. Destruction in Atlanta. Not the way we thought it would go down. We'll be right back. All right, we're back with the Day After podcast. Of course, that's Buck Sanders. I'm Tommy Ashley, and this is Jason Staples. And I'm on, we referenced it briefly early. Here's where the dam broke, boys. And I'm going to put it at the feet of the grown-ups again. Ty Chandler, 9-yard gain to the UNC 41. Ty Chandler, no-yard rush. Ty Chandler, no-yard rush. Timeout. Carolina. Okay, you burn a timeout and you still go for it on your side of the field. The game's 13-7 at the time. The defense is playing well, or has played well. Sims is in the game, but they stopped him on his first drive. And then you inexplicably go for first down after you've already missed it on second and third and short. Jason, it can't happen. Two things, two catastrophic errors in my mind on that play. And I don't care what the analytics say. One, if you're going to go for it on fourth down, have the play in on third down. You don't burn a timeout there. That's simple. And it happens all the time with this team. And secondly, your defense is playing well. Punt the football. Live to fight another day. You can't give up a short field. That's what they preach all the time. And yet they do it anyway. To me, people talk about the Joffrey Brown drop was bad. I agree.
It was.
This play, this series right here was the you know what moment for this game in my mind, and it certainly played out that way in the end. What do you say?
I think they should have gone for it. It was the right call. It was absolutely the right call, and you follow the analytics there. Now, I have very strong opinions on using a timeout there and then going for it, and then using a timeout and going for it with that particular combination of a play call and execution, especially since Sam Howell, as far as I could tell, misread the play and twice actually, and got them into a position where he ran himself into numbers and then made the wrong read as a runner. So the execution looked even worse. But to me, I thought that was a bad play call in the situation, given what you were getting from your running game, getting what you were getting from your offense overall, and then you combine that with a bad decision in terms of read from the quarterback on the read game. That should have been a handoff. And then after making that bad decision, compounding that by not going the proper direction based on your blocker, which then leads to a loss. So there was a lot of bad stuff there. Timeout, I think suspect play call, poor execution from your quarterback, and also, so-so execution from your offensive line, and negative, I would give a minus to your lead blocker at the tight end position there as well. So yeah, I agree that was an absolute momentum shift, and that was a transition point in this game. But I think you have to follow the math. I mean, why take the risk of punting there? I mean, it's a worse decision. Why roll the dice?
What's the risk of punting there? What's the risk? Your defense is giving up 80 yards at the moment.
The risk of punting there is that your expected value is worse. So it's one of those things like, okay, if I tell you your odds of winning are based on 1,000 prior iterations of this situation, your odds of winning go up by 2 points. If you go for this, they go down by 2 points. Let's say percentage, your odds of winning go up by 5% if you go for this. Your odds of losing go up by 5% if you punt it. You can say that, well, you ought to punt it. But I mean, I think the risk is, well, we're gonna buck the odds. We're gonna punt it, and it's gonna be worse. And the analytics are pretty clear there that it's a go, because possession of the ball matters a lot. And the fact of the matter is, if you can't get short yardage, if you can't win in short yardage, you're probably going to lose the game, because that tells you so much about the game anyway. And as it turns out, the defense really struggled in the second half. And here's the thing, based on what happened defensively from that point forward, would it matter if you got an extra 30 yards, if they had to go an extra 30 yards? I mean, that's really what you're getting. I mean, so if you punt, you're giving them the ball with 30 yards further to go.
And Kiernan downs it inside the 10. Carolina's defense is played. I guess we'll never know, bottom line.
We'll never know. But my view is very much, it's sort of like bunting in baseball. Teams used to bunt all the time, and it used to be one of those like, well, you need to bunt here. And commentators all the time would criticize teams for not bunting. But the analytics were so strongly against bunting that, like, no, that the risk is not bunt. The risk is when you choose not to bunt. That basically all these teams decided eventually to make that call. It's the same thing here. The risk is actually deciding to trust your defense in this era of offensive football, rather than coming into the game and making sure that you're ready to go. To me, the debacle starts with, if I know that I'm going to be a team that's going to go for fourth down and I'm going to play the math and I'm going to make the right decisions there, I need to have 5 plays that I absolutely know I can count on, that I feel really strongly that I know I can block against what they're doing, that this is bread and butter that we work on a regular basis. And I don't see that. That's what my objection is. And I see the same problems in the red zone at times, where the red zone, over the past couple of years, past few years, some of the approaches in the red zone, actually, you can take this all the way back into the Fedora era for sure. Some of the approaches in the red zone drive me nuts. It's like, look, this is really important situationally, and you need to have a really strong identity of who you're going to be here and know that this is what we're going to do. And the fact that you take a timeout before that tells me that you don't actually have that little box on your play sheet that says, okay, our first 4th and 1, this is what we're running. Mm-hmm. That needs to be decided on Thursday. Actually, that needs to be decided on Monday or Sunday. And then you work that hard at least one day in the week. And then you go back over it and you make sure that box on your play sheet is filled on Thursday and Friday. So that when you come to the game, you can tempo that. The best thing you can do is go 3rd and short. You don't get it. And then all of a sudden you go tempo and you have your automatic call so that you can run that out on 4th and 1 and do something that you've been working on all week, as this is our 4th and 1 call in this case. And we just go alert 1, alert 1, alert 1, bam. And everybody does it. And you do it before the defense can even get set into their 4th and 1 defense. And you feel pretty good about that. That's where my objection is. It's not the call to go for it. That's the right call. It's how you go for it that you put yourself in a better chance to make the decision. As soon as you take the timeout, you're letting the defense go with the personnel they want. You're letting them dictate a lot of things by alignment, formation, different things like that. Now you've given them some advantages. That's my objection. Once you take the timeout, that drives me crazy, because that communicates some things in terms of lack of preparation that need to be better during the week.
Yep. I disagree on the I don't think they should have gone for it, especially after you call the timeout for the reasons you just talked about. Kick the damn football. But Buck, I want to bring you in on it. It goes back to game day situational coaching, and it all relates to the grown-ups in the room. You run the same play virtually 3 times and they don't get a yard. Yes, that's bad. You're probably going to lose. But Josh or Sims has had issues turning the ball over. Didn't last night, but he has all year. You punt them back deep and force them to snap it more than twice before they score. That's why I think it was a horrific call and a horrific execution, whatever. Kick the football. But what do you think? And then we'll move on to something else with the defense.
I think you're both right.
Thank you.
There we go.
There's something to be said. I mean, for punting the ball in that situation, you're right that if you force Sims, who is his first game back, to drive the length of the field to score, then you're going to have a better chance possibly of him not being able to score. I like the attitude. I like the statement that it makes when it's near the 50-yard line and it's 4th down and 1. And it's sort of like the 3-point shooter on the basketball court, right? The guy that's got the 25% 3rd point, 3-point line average. And, he's taking a shot from deep, from 3, and the coach is there saying, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot. Great shot. And in this particular situation, had they picked up that first down, that's certainly something we would not be talking about today. And it would have made a little bit of a statement. North Carolina would have had a shorter field, possibly. Georgia Tech would have had a longer field. Certainly, as Jason said, a transitional moment. I can see it both ways, and argued both ways. And I don't know that there's a right answer there. I do know that if it's 2nd and 1, forget the 4th and 1 call. You need to have a 2nd and 1 call. You need to have a call where, hey, if I'm within a yard of the first down marker, there's got to be a play in my repertoire that's going to get me that 1 yard 95% of the time. And 3rd and 1, if we didn't make it on 2nd and 1, okay, somebody slipped, there was a fluke or something. But 3rd and 1 and they miss it again, no. So there should have been a 2nd and 1 call there in the playbook.
And to me, the 2nd and 1 call should have been a throw.
Pump it deep.
Free down.
Especially
if you know it's 4 down territory.
Yes.
Right? If you know that's 4 down territory, which again, this is planning. Yeah. Okay, this is 4 down territory. You communicate that as a staff. That means I know that if I have a 3rd-year quarterback who I can trust to not get sacked, which is how 3rd-year quarterbacks should be. So, you get extra pressure, you just throw it away, you get rid of the football quickly. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do as a 3rd-year quarterback. So now I've got that 3rd-year quarterback that I can trust. And it's 2nd and 1. I'm using that opportunity to, maybe test the defense with something.
Go play action go play action, because they're going to bite on play action.
That's right. So now, this is the play that you can really manipulate a defense with and see what you can do. And then, okay, now you're 3rd and 1, and now you got 2 plays.
Yeah.
Mind-boggling. It's in cute.
So what you're both saying now is that I'm right.
Well, you're always right. I understand that.
You are, we're going to go with that, El Jefe.
And I believe that when we had you on Inside Carolina Live yesterday, you nailed it on that segment, and you nailed it on your pregame column, So yeah, you're always right. I understand my lane, and I stay in it as frequently as possible. Let's look at the defense. And Jason, this is something we talked about off air briefly, and I wanted you to stop talking then so you can start talking now. Jeremiah Gimel's comment that they did not prepare for Jeff Sims has certainly gotten folks, what's a nice word, twerked up. And at times, I believe rightfully so. But explain your take on this, because I think it has more clarity than maybe some of the flame throwing that has gone on since he made it.
My first thought on hearing that comment was, well, why would you prepare separately for Jeff Sims? He does the same stuff as Yates, just better. This is not a situation where you've got the elf and as one quarterback, and then
Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, even
Lamar
worse,
Jackson.
Lamar Jackson as the other, right? If you've got those 2 quarterbacks, or if you've got one quarterback that's a runner and one quarterback that's a thrower, and you have a different offense for each one of them, then yeah, you know what? You prepare differently for those guys. But Georgia Tech's running the same stuff for Yates as they are for Sims. It's just Sims does it better. So at that point, you're not preparing for a quarterback. You're preparing for the Georgia Tech offense and what they do.
Which, to this point, hasn't been very much. No. You need to throw that in the mix.
No, but the difference is that Sims is much more of a weapon as a runner because of his size and overall speed makeup. That you could see that in a couple plays where the play with Eugene Asante, he gets him one-on-one in the open field, and you could see that, look, one guy's a better athlete than the other there. Sims was just flat out a dude on that play and turned what should have been about a 3-yard gain into a 40-yard play. And that's not a situation of not being prepared for a specific quarterback. That's just a situation of that quarterback doing what you knew they were going to do with the other guy too, and doing it better. Although also the bigger problem here is not so much lack of preparation for a quarterback. What's concerning to me is all of the busts in terms of run fits at different points in this game. They played undisciplined on defense. There were a lot of plays where, and that was one of them where, you had two guys in the same gap. You had the defensive end that was Des Lawrence, or
Evans.
that was Des Evans. Yeah, sorry, Des Evans.
Wrong Des.
Yeah, wrong Des. Look, I've been doing this too long, and keeping names straight is getting harder and harder as I do this.
I agree with that statement totally.
But yeah, that was Des Evans, and he took the outside gap, and then they had a blitz behind it with Conley, and Conley also went outside. One of those guys has to take the C gap instead of the D gap. And if you have those guys in the right gaps, then there's no run. And then you don't end up with the situation where the spy, and they had a spy on the quarterback there, basically. That was Asante. The spy got into that one-on-one and got embarrassed. Well, you can't have that. You can't have that bust. And they had a number of those where, instead of they had guys chasing the running back when they're responsible for the quarterback, or guys that took just the wrong angle here and there, that allowed a running back space. So just little things in terms of fundamentals on run fits were really what killed them in the second half. This was not about not being prepared for a quarterback or what that quarterback does or whatever. They're running the same stuff. The problem is that they got out of sorts and stopped doing their jobs when that quarterback made a few plays. And that to me is what happened, is that some of the discipline and some of those things broke down. And defense is really, it becomes defensive Armageddon when you have guys that stop doing their job and start trying to do someone else's job because they're worried about X, Y, and Z. Defense is all about doing your job and beating the guy who's responsible for keeping you from doing your job. As soon as you're not in your gap, because maybe you're trying to make a play and get, you're jumping around a little bit. As soon as you're out of your gap, it's a big play. That's just the way football is. And defense is a team game. You have to be in your exact right spot and do it with your hair on fire. And I saw some hair on fire, but then I saw, toast on as a result of that, as guys got out of gaps, as guys collapsed on a back when the quarterback, was keeping it, as guys, were held up by the quarterback and kept bad angles and allowed backs inside, a variety of different things. This was on poor discipline on the defensive side. And does that, is that just players? No, I'm not just blaming players here. It's the coaching staff's job to get the defense coordinated and to get the defense to do their jobs, to make sure that those fundamentals are kept. And they didn't do a good enough job with that. They weren't able to get these guys to actually stay in the proper gaps, to match up with what they were doing. So, and to force Georgia Tech to do what they don't do well. You want Jeff Sims to have to throw from the pocket downfield. You just do. And he made a couple of those throws, but I mean, you look at his final numbers. Jeff Sims had, let's see, 10 of 13 for 112 yards. Completion percentage is too high, but I mean, 112 yards, you can live with that to some degree. You want that attempt number a lot higher than that. You want to force him to have to throw, because really where he killed you was 10 carries for 128 yards.
Yeah.
You generally don't want an opposing ball carrier to average 12.8 yards a carry. And that was all because of those busts in terms of guys being out of gaps, guys jumping around, guys losing one-on-one matchups in the open field and all that. So, yeah.
After Virginia, we talked about if there was another situation similar to Virginia, there needs to be some reevaluation on the defensive side of the ball. Buck, is Carolina, is Jay Bateman at that point to reevaluate who's playing? I mean, is that a fair statement? Because to Jason's point, you can lead them to drink, but you can't force them to drink. There were times where they could make plays, but also to Jason's point is the bust. I think Gimmel also talked about, there's one situation you had 9 guys in one defense, 2 other guys doing something else, touchdown for Georgia Tech. You play against good teams, they're going to eat you up when you're not prepared. Where are we on the defensive side of the ball, Buck?
What I'm going to say now is probably not the most popular thing I've ever said on these podcasts. But here's one thing to consider. Think about, just toy with the idea a little bit. We've all talked about getting more people on the field for the defense during a game, using substitutions more, splitting the carries more. And I haven't seen, it's probably up now. I just haven't looked at it, the snap counts. But and we saw a good bit of that against Virginia. The snap counts were divided up a lot more. The thing is that you have got to get these new players that have not been on the field to this point, at least in any consistent rotation or predetermined sort of, this guy's going to play this many series or going to play this guy in this situation. These guys have got to gain some experience, and they might be fresher. They might be more physically, more athletic, more everything except more experienced. And so you just toy with the idea a little bit that maybe having a certain number of even snaps along the DL, you maybe have 9 or 8 defensive linemen each getting an equal number of snaps, might not be the best thing. That might not be the best approach. I'm just throwing that out there for people to consider, because on a couple of occasions I saw North Carolina substitute what appeared to be almost their entire defense. 5 or 6 players coming off the sidelines, 5 or 6 players going off. And without being in the rhythm of the game, without having gone against your particular side of the guy that you're supposed to beat on your side of the ball before during that game, it might be too much to ask for that level of substitution at one time. Now, you are going to have to evaluate who's going to play, and maybe you give that guy a much higher number of snaps than what you were initially planning to give him, over a guy that has been playing, has more experience. But the only way that really talented guy behind him is going to get more experience is to play him over the more experienced guy. I think those kinds of things, how many snaps each player gets and in what situation, can be something that is a tremendous headache for defensive staff. So I'm just throwing that out there. But again, I do think Tommy, your main point being that they're going to have to make some decisions about who's going to get lion's share of the snaps. And it's got to be based on productivity and, your adherence to your scheme, staying in your gap, doing the things that you need to be doing, earn your spot. So what kills me is that Virginia can throw on North Carolina for 540 yards, and Georgia Tech can run on North Carolina for, 300 yards, something crazy like that. And North Carolina seems to be unable to stop what the other team is best at doing. if you're trying to make a team one-dimensional, what you want to do is to take away what they're best at, make them play left-handed, make them do the things that they're not very good at. If you're letting them do the things that they're really good at, you're kind of running uphill there defensively.
Yep. Throwing, yeah.
And we all know what flows downhill, Buck.
Yep.
Looking at the snap counts, Vahasic 42 maxed out on the defensive line. Gimmel, of course, 64. Interesting number. Eugene Asante, only 14 snaps.
He didn't have many last week either.
And he didn't have very many good snaps in those 14.
Yeah, and Des Evans down at 15 as well. So let's get to where we're wrapping this one up. We've been going a little longer than I thought we always do. But
yeah, we try to get off the air pretty quick after games like this.
Yeah, I just need to get on a bad game. See ya. Jason, they're 2-2 in the conference. The other division pick, preseason divisional pick, is also 2-2, or they're 2-2 overall. The other divisional picks also 2-2. That would be Clemson. The ACC is upside down. A lot of good teams, or a lot of average teams beating a lot of mediocre teams. Where does Carolina go from here? The fan base is certainly rocked, and rightfully so. And it's one thing to lose. It's another thing to lose in the way Carolina has managed to do it in the 2 losses. And again, I go back to the grown-ups in the room. I've said it over and over because they're very similar losses. But where does this team go from here? There are 8 games left in the regular season. Still a ton to play for. Maybe not the preseason goals, but if you're the coaching staff, what do? You got a game Saturday. You got a game the next Saturday, and on and on and on until this season runs out.
Well, I mean, where you go from here is Duke at home, which, I mean, that's a benefit. You talked about, okay, average teams beating mediocre teams. Well, you may right now have a mediocre team whipping up on a bad team. So, Duke should be able to help cure what ails you. But the biggest thing for the coaching staff is that you're going to try to focus on fixing the process and making sure that you can, again, every week, it's about finding what mistakes were made and fixing those mistakes and helping guys understand what they did, what they need to do better, and then giving them opportunities in practice to rep the things that they made those mistakes on, so that they get it right, so that they can't get it wrong. I mean, that's the old thing. You don't rep something, you don't practice something until you can get it right. You never practice just until you get it right. You practice until you can no longer do it wrong. And right now they're in positions where guys can do certain things, but it's not consistent enough. They're not consistent in doing that right thing every time. And you have to focus on that stuff, and you have to get the team refocused. And I think you also have to figure out what's going on in your quarterback's head, in your leader's head, and really work on. And I think Buck hit on something in terms of trust between your quarterback and your receivers. I think in particular, there seems to be some lack of trust between Howell and Antoine Green. Because it seems to me that when Howell does miss some of those deep shots, or when a guy's open deep and doesn't get looked at, it tends to be that guy. And I wonder why that is. But either way, there seems to be some trust issues in terms of him not being willing to pull the trigger on certain things. And you've got to figure out what you can do to get him comfortable and get him able to trust his guys and get him to see the field and look at his keys correctly. Because a lot of those things can just help you. The first half, if Carolina plays on offense like they should, then that game's maybe over at the half, given how the defense looked at that point. And then you don't have to deal with the adjustments and some of those things in the second half. So it's all about fixing those mistakes, figuring out who you are as a team. I still think this offense lacks some identity, and they've got to establish that again during the week and against Duke. And then, after Duke, they get Florida State, which, again, another cream puff. And, hopefully you can fix your problems as a coaching staff in those 2 weeks before you play Miami, who also might have given up by that point in the season. I mean, that's the other benefit. So there's still a lot of winnable games on the schedule, and it's still actually possible to win the division. But you have to take your focus off of those long-term goals and get this team to do what they're supposed to do day in, day out. And you got a lot of young guys who have to learn how to compete like that day in, day out to be able to win and win consistently at this level.
Great point there about, and I think maybe we've all lost focus and sight of that. And definitely the team has, it looks like to me. And that again falls on the coaching to keep it there. But it's be 1-0 each weekend. Buck, I'll let you close the show. This team has some things to play for. To Jason's point, it needs to be 1-0 every weekend from here on out.
Great point by Jason and you. I think the thing that I'm going to be most interested in seeing is that, yes, North Carolina has lost games during MAC 2.0 in 2019 and in 2020. And to Jason's point about crowds, in 2020, there weren't any crowds, so crowds couldn't be a factor in 2020 too much because they just weren't there. But I do think that going forward, being home for 3 consecutive weekends will be a help. The other point, though, and the original point I was trying to make is that under MAC 2.0, even though there have been other losses, to my mind, the loss last night was the worst one under the Mac Brown 2.0 regime.
That one in Tallahassee last year is a real close.
The number of points they lost by, start with that.
Fair point.
They against Florida State, at least that was what, a 3-point game or thereabouts.
And they're going to the Orange Bowl whether they win that game or lose that game last year, and that's
right.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I like your point, but keep going.
So this was a very bad loss. Let's get that out of the way first, because there were failures on both sides of the ball. It was kind of a system failure, as opposed to, you could look at one or two isolated things and say, well, if they'd have just done this better, they might would have won the game. Well, you lost by 20 points. So you had to have a lot of things go your way that didn't go your way. So I'm going to be interested to see how the team and the staff bounces back from this, because it's different really than trying to bounce back from a 1-point loss or a 3-point loss on the road somewhere where you could kind of, well, if this referee call had gone our way, we would have probably won. So that's the thing I'm going to be interested in, seeing how they approach fixing all that needs to be fixed before they get, say, to the Notre Dame game. So I'll end with that.
Yep. And you just had me editing my title to the story of this podcast. It is now titled System Failure. And that, and everything we've discussed, that is the most concerning for this guy, is that fact. It's been the day after pod. They're always not fun when Carolina loses, but this one's been enlightening. This one's been, I hope, informative for the folks that listened, that took the time to wallow in the sorrow of Carolina's performance and listen to this one. I'm sure VIP with EJ and Mike shall be quite interesting coming later on. Jason Staples, Buck Sanders, Johnny T-shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Thanks, boys.
Thanks, Tommy.